Hi, welcome. In this video, I'm going to discuss a very difficult topic for trainers, the majority of trainers to really understand as it relates to incentivizing and motivating the dog. Now, again, it's a human desire, okay, to want to reward the dog, to say, good boy. When the dog's going into a position, trainers are looking for something to motivate the dog, to incentivize the dog to go in the various positions so they can build this picture of change, this mainstream idea of dog training. And again, this is where I show that why mainstream dog training, for the most part, is a complete washout, okay? Because even balanced trainers are set up to think this way at a certain level. They're following, even though you're working off quadrants, okay, I want to be clear about this, how this packages up through how it changes or fails to change how the owner thinks is a critical aspect of how you approach training. This is why being very intentional about understanding about what training is, it's really important to be aware of incentivizing the dog and how that connects through that owner at the relational level to change the perceptions from the dog to the owner. Okay, it's very, very important because it's an issue about motives, whether the motives are going to clean up or not at the level needed. So again, it's all about, when I'm doing training, I'm following a certain sequence for a reason, just so people understand that. And the incentive I'm using, okay, is about what's reasonable. And I talk about what's reasonable, I'm talking about influence coming online at the relational level. Influence is coming online immediately, okay? And it's not about corrective influence that way, okay? It's about looking at what is promoting change in and through that person, okay, relationally. It's very, very important that people start to get this. So therefore, the motivator, again, is the process itself, okay, through the interactions involved to create this change, okay. It's about what's reasonable. It defines relational influence. So again, getting back to this issue about incentivizing, okay, this is why when trainers look at training and they look at what represents change for them, and this is the thing about connecting these dots properly, they immediately will start to focus on building that picture through response. Okay, they'll say, okay, the dog going into the sit position, doing a down, doing certain things, the typical mainstream idea of things. But again, those interactions, how they play out through incentivizing, it's important to understand that when you use incentives, when you use certain motivating influences to try to motivate the dog to do certain things, is that oftentimes the motives of the dog don't clean up. The perceptions don't change between dog and owner. The type of influence happening is not meaningful. The dog's state of wanting or desire for doing certain things isn't based on the dog respecting that owner. Again, when I say respect, again, a lot of people take that and twist that. What I'm talking about, it's about leadership, about what's reasonable. Because here again, understand, nature's about strength and weakness, how that's defined, again, through the personality type of the person. Dogs share a very profound connection with us at that level, and they actually know the real deal. So when people are actually, in a very weak position relationally, this is when you start to get all these behavior problems because the motives of the dog are rotten. Okay, they're starting to express this elevated states of mind. So they're seeking, fulfillment that way. And this issue about and they'll find comfort and power. So again, this is where the picture will, the picture of what represents a balanced dog. Dogs will look balanced at times because finding comfort and power means that they'll look okay, even as they're holding control and power in the relationship. So, of course, we'll see that something's wrong. We'll know something's wrong because how the dog's reacting in other situations. But really, how the dog reacts in other situations at times, that's the truth of it. Just understand everything else is, I pretty much guarantee you, is going to be, upside down. So it's a counterfeit based on the fact of, those control is not being exposed. The dog's in control, but because it has control, it's going to look balanced. Okay, this is why when you bring a dog under a certain level of influence, the dog's going to react to that. Okay, it's going to expose the card, so to speak. So again, going back to this issue about incentivizing, again, the human concept is to say, The dog goes into position. Good boy. We're all excited about that. But understand people are making assumptions on that. Okay, at the physical level, the dog going into that position immediately. And again, this is where you get this thing about a lot of trainers, because they're so focused on the positive side of things, they'll immediately make an assumption, say that that's something good. Okay, that position, that dog went in that position, or did a certain thing, and that represents that change is happening. Well, they're actually not looking at the motives of the dog. Okay, again, the dog can do certain things, but again, I use the example. When if I asked my son to go to the store, but there's a big difference between telling him to go because based on at the relationship level on the roles, okay, about status, saying because I'm your dad and you're supposed to go, you're just going to go, or incentivizing by giving them $100 bill. Well, again, same as this concept. You get the response, but there's a big difference between the two. Okay, within the context of motives. What's motivating the child to do the thing they're doing, or what's motivating the dog to go in that position. But again, the key up on the fact about, okay, what, is this meaningful? But again, here's the problem, and I'll put this out here, is when, trainers approach training a certain way out of the starting gate and start to use, then they're not, you can assume that they're not looking at motives that way anyway. Because again, there's a proper way to approach training from the beginning. So for example, when I'm doing training, I'm working off a position in interaction, but right away to focus on creating my moments. Okay, it's not about setting up the picture that way. It's about looking at immediately testing the motives of the dog, changing perceptions right away. So again, I'm not focused on good boy and all those things, because I understand how that packages up. What that represents to that owner, about changing perceptions. And again, about the response to the dog, understanding about how the dog responds within the framework of the method. I call it the relational changing script. And knowing that has to hold true, that the integrity of that has to maintain. And so you'll see me working leash a lot, but I'm not focusing the picture that way. So anyway, just something to think about. When you look at, incentivizing, using certain things, could be a treat, it could be praise, whatever it is. Just understand you're dealing with motives here, okay? Don't ever assume because a dog does certain things and things look a certain way that represents change at all. That's a very, that's a critical thing to take away from this video. Is that does not mean that at all. In fact, the truth of it, this is why there's always seems to be a disconnect between the classroom and real life. People go out in the street with the dog on the leash, and next thing you know, everything comes off. The wheels come off the train, because those are not lining up. I'll say the classroom and real life, because change hasn't actually happened. Trainers are not looking at the motives that way. They're not looking at how this packages up relationally that way. They're not putting the motives of the dog to the test. They're making assumptions. So again, it's really important that when you do dog training, that right out of the starting gate, you approach it for what it is. It's a relational changing process. There's a better way to do dog training than just immediately going into this picture and just immediately going into this thing about how a dog responds certain ways. You really have to be careful with those things. It's really knowing, it has to be very intentional with how it sets up. So anyway, just something to think about using incentives, trying to motivate the dog to do certain things. Just because you don't use food doesn't mean you aren't still going to have a problem. Okay, it's really important to understand this issue about influence and why it's needed, and the distinction between corrective and relational influence, and how that sets up change. And again, I encourage you to watch my videos. I talk about this quite a lot, but again, it's really important. If you want to be successful, you got right at the starting gate, you got to identify training for what it is. So thanks for watching.